If you have a bachelor's degree and live anywhere in the United States, there's now a way for you to take your bourbon education to the next level. The Distilled Spirits Business Certificate from the University of Louisville is a 6-course online program that will prepare you for the business side of the spirits industry. Offered by the AACSB Accredited College of Business, this certificate is taught by business professors and industry leaders from Brown-Forman, Beam Suntory, Jack Daniels, and more. Join this one-of-a-kind experience and prepare for your next adventure. Get enrolled into this online program at uofl.me/Bourbon Pursuit. Let's kind of talk about your history, your upbringing, because you're a young strapping lad.
Your last name's Lux, so obviously you have something to do around here.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome back, everybody. It's episode 246 of Bourbon Pursuit. I'm Kenny, one of the hosts, and here's your COVID-19 updates because a lot has changed since last week. Texas has temporarily adjusted its laws to be more lenient on the drinks industry and are now allowing alcohol as a part of to-go orders. This is pretty big news because we know that anything in Texas that is regulated by alcohol is very, very hard to change. And they are also enlisting distributor trucks that are designated for alcohol-only delivery to support grocers and delivery needs during this time. Four Roses Distillery will temporarily suspend their operations of its distillery located in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, and that began on March 20th of 2020. And based on the current situation, Four Roses expects to commence operations once again on April 6th of 2020. A new statement by the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, or known as the WSWA, their CEO and president, Michelle Korsmo, warns that in a crisis, unintended consequences are major concerns for industries and private citizens, and they implore all governors to keep wine and spirits retailers open as to not encourage bad actors to pop up black market liquor operations. Other industry partners, including the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, otherwise known as DISCUS, has made a similar statement. And Fred Minnick recently published an article on Forbes referring to the actions taken by the state of Pennsylvania, where they closed the doors of all alcohol stores in the state, that the same thing could happen to them as it did during Prohibition. And you can read more with his article to the link in our show notes. Right now, many other distilleries are making hand sanitizer. Back on March 20th of 2020, the FDA issued a new guidance for the temporary manufacturing of hand sanitizer by companies and entities that are not currently regulated by the FDA as a drug manufacturer. The TTB, or the Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, has found that it is necessary and desirable to waive provisions of Internal Revenue Law with regard to distilled spirits, and therefore is providing certain exemptions and authorizations to distilled spirits permittees who wish to produce ethanol-based hand sanitizers to address the demand during this emergency. Any existing DSP can immediately commence production of hand sanitizer or ethanol for use in hand sanitizer without having to obtain authorization first. These measures are generally authorized under authorities that apply in disaster situations and are right now approved through June 30th of 2020. There are now over 50 distilleries across the U.S. that have switched to making hand sanitizer, including big ones like Wilderness Trail, Smooth Ambler, Town Branch, Rabbit Hole, Old Forester, and there's many more craft distilleries across the nation like Koval in Illinois, Corsair in Tennessee, and Caledonia Spirits in Texas. I would love to be able to give everyone a shout out on here, but you can contact your local distillery to see if they have any available for public purchase. In addition, there's a lot of giving going on by bigger corporations, and here's some of the highlights. Beam Suntory and Southern Glazers are donating $1 million to support the impacted bar and restaurant employees. Beam Suntory is also working with other distributors across various states, including major brands, Badger Liquor, Fedway Associates, Allied Beverage Corp., Empire Distributors, Best Brands, Horizon Beverage Group, and more to provide donations to local organizations that will further help the support in the trade of their respective communities. Diageo has also pledged $1 million to the USBG, or the United States Bartenders Guild, in their emergency assistance fund for COVID-19. Diageo is also donating another €1 million to support bartenders in the United Kingdom, or £1 million. Brown-Forman is donating $1 million to USBG, the Restaurant Workers Community Foundation, and One Louisville is separating between those three different organizations. Gallo's New Amsterdam Vodka and Barstool Sports created a new t-shirt highlighting Support Your Local Bartender program, where 100% of the net proceeds will go to U.S. Bartenders Guild Foundation, and additionally, New Amsterdam will donate $5 for every t-shirt purchased. Jameson donates another $500,000 to the USBG. Michter's Distillery and Philip Duff have made a $10,000 donation to the USBG. Patron is donating $1 million to 3 different organizations. You have the Children of Restaurant Employees, otherwise known as CORE, Another Round, Another Rally, and the James Beard Foundation. Sazerac and Fireball have started a GoFundMe called The World's Biggest Tip Jar by starting it off with a $100,000 donation, and it will match all contributions up to $400,000 donations, with everything going to tax-exempt organizations. Tito's is donating $1 million between 4 organizations focused on those in the industry. You have the CORE, USBG, Southern Smoke, and the World Central Kitchen. They are also pledging another additional $1 million as further needs are seen. Zamora is donating 400,000 euros through charities such as Caritas, the Red Cross, and the Food Bank Foundation. Yelp, who you all know the app, is providing $25 million in relief in the form of waived advertising fees and free advertising, product services, and more than during this period. In addition, we're trying to do our part as well. Bourbon Pursuit, we have our own fundraiser going to help support the USBG, or the United States Bartenders Guild. So at this time, you can go and you can win bottles of Pursuit Series and our latest barrel picks from Willet. Go to bourbonpursuit.com/USBG to get entered into our raffle. We appreciate all the support. Discus, that we had talked about a little bit earlier before, the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, is now asking the government to include distillers in the COVID-19 Relief Fund. Distilleries across the nation have closed tasting rooms, suspended tours, and canceled large events to limit the exposure of COVID-19. As a result, distillers have been forced to make difficult decisions, including in some cases shutting down production and laying off staff. As a result, many distilleries may not be able to survive during this crisis. Distillers right now employ 1.6 million people across the country and generate $180 billion in economic activity for the United States. You can help take action by supporting Spirits United with your name and vote with the link in our show notes. This story poured out a little bit over last week, and I'm sure many people know about it, but we need to report on anyway because we all know about Jack Rose. It's that iconic whiskey bar in DC that's owned and operated by Bill Thomas, who you've heard back on episodes 67 and 127. They're putting up all 2,700 bottles for sale in response to the escalating health and economic crisis. The public can now search through their treasure trove by stopping into the bar, browsing their Whiskey Bible menu, which is also available online, and talking to Bill Thomas himself. You can order anything you want. That could mean 20 or 30-year-old pours of Ardbeg or Macallan, hard-to-find Willett Family Estates, or Jack Rose's own private barrels that are made in collaboration with Blanton's and other distilleries. The drams will be packaged in little sealed bottles that can be kept on your home bar, and pours of the rare stuff, or anything that's $100 plus an ounce, will be 50% off, while all other pours are 20% off. Thomas says he plans to offer the spirits at a lower price than what consumers would find on the secondary market. And if you're in the area, they also have to-go cocktails available from all 3 of their company bars, Jack Rose, Imperial, and Dram and Grain. From classics like Old Fashions and Manhattans to whimsical creations that they all have, starting at $10 each. The story has spread, and when it broke, people were lined up for around 5 blocks. Their website crashed, and they had to use Facebook and Instagram to let everyone know how to contact them. So please, check out the Jack Rose social pages for the latest and up-to-date info on how to get your hands on anything. All right, let's change subjects for a minute. Let's get out of the coronavirus talk. Wave Financial has finalized an agreement with Danville, Kentucky-based Wilderness Trail Distilleries to tokenize between 10 and 20,000 barrels of whiskey worth up to around $20 million that will be made publicly available through a specialized digital asset fund. Now, if that didn't make sense, this is turning bourbon inventory into cryptocurrency. So known as Wave Whiskey 2020 Digital Fund, the investors will be able to purchase asset-backed tokens linked to an inventory of whiskey barreled this year that will represent as many as 4 million bottles of bourbon. By tokenizing it, Wave says that investors can gain exposure to bourbon's value appreciation and can also share some of the proceeds from when a whiskey is sold to wholesale to merchants, and 3 years after the whiskey is first distilled, and the tokens are then issued to investors. Users will be able to trade their tokens at whatever price they wish, and Wave is also in discussions with some security token exchanges to develop an official secondary market infrastructure to facilitate better trading in the whiskey-backed tokens. A Wave spokesperson added that the token was available for accredited investors from all around the world, and with a first close at the end of March and a second at the end of June. A final close expected to take place in September. You can read more about that with a link in our show notes. And in more Wilderness Trail news, the yeast and fermentation doctor from Wilderness Trail that we all know as Pat Heist, who we had back on episode 121 that blew everyone's mind, had his first TED Talk published. It talks about the effect of climate on production and the quality of bourbon. And this was done at TEDx at the University of Nevada. Give it a listen on YouTube with the link in our show notes. All right, for today's episode, we feature one of the largest spirits companies you probably don't know much about. You've heard of brands like Ezra Brooks, Rebel Yell, and Blood Oath, but there's a lot to discover about Luxco. We sit down with Philip Lux, the global brand ambassador of Lux Row Distillers, and he's also the son of the CEO Don Lux, as he guides us through the family history of Lux's, along with the acquisitions of their bourbon brands and labels. Then we also get the inside scoop on what's happening at Lux Row Distillers. After sourcing whiskey for many years, it became apparent they needed to build a distillery, and they did it right in Bardstown, Kentucky. We discuss the future of the brands and how they plan on growing and evolving. Also, don't sleep on this location during your Bourbon Trail visit because the facility looks incredible. Let's get on with the show. Here's Joe from Barrel Bourbon, and then you've got Fred Minnick with Above the Char.
It's Joe from Barrel Bourbon. Tasting whiskey straight from the barrel was truly a life-changing moment for me. In 2013, I launched Barrel Craft Spirits so everyone could have the experience of tasting whiskey at cask strength. Next time, ask your bartender for Barrel Bourbon.
I'm Fred Minnick, and this is Above the Char. I have some very, very staggering news. This just in from ACSA, or better known as the American Craft Spirits Association. According to a survey of ACSA, 150 craft distillers, 67% will be forced to close within 3 months. 32% of those respondents said they won't even last a month. 87% of all craft distillery tasting rooms have closed, and 60% of the distilleries making craft spirits has already laid off employees or furloughed staff. This is absolutely staggering. 2,000 small distillers across the country, and that survey tells us we may very well lose 2/3 of them in a matter of months. Those are people who have put it all on the line to do something that they love and, want to really push the envelope. And this just breaks my heart. This just absolutely breaks my heart. The distilling community right now is trying to get federal support. So they're basically looking for the same kind of federal funds that's going to be given to the airline industry and the hospitality industry. And here we are, amidst this coronavirus scare, and we're about to see a lot of great people lose their dreams, and that's just very, very scary. I think about what we do, Kenny, Ryan, and I. This is it's my job, but let's face it, I have a dream job. I talk and write about whiskey for a living, like all the time. And I've sometimes said some things that are not so nice about craft whiskeys. It was never anything personal. It's just about their whiskey. But never in a million years would I wish this upon anybody in the industry. I can't even imagine to begin to think of what it must be like right now to be a craft distiller and to know that if things don't change, you're going to have to shut down for good. So let's do what we can. Let's do what we can. Let's buy their products. And you may push back here and say, hey, well, Fred, we can't go to the liquor store. Our governor has shut us down. We have to stay inside. That's very well true. But get this, there's a lot of delivery services out there right now that will bring a good old dram to your doorstep. You can go to cillbox.com. Craft Shack is another one. You can go to drizzlies.com. And these are all delivery services that will buy from a local retailer and deliver to you. Another one that you can join is called spiritsnetwork.com. Go to spiritsnetwork.com. I actually have a lot of shows on there, but you can buy booze and then watch booze TV. So there's a lot of options out there that you can go to and buy craft whiskey or any kind of craft spirit. But listen, we have to band together. We have to do what we can to help these small distillers because we can't lose them. We just can't. It's very scary. It's absolutely very scary. And so let's do what we can. Let's band together and let's save a distillery or two. And that's this week's Above the Char. Hey, make sure you are checking out my YouTube. I am dropping content every single day in hopes of helping you get through the boredom. You can go to YouTube and just look for my channel. Just search my name, Fred Minnick. Until next week, cheers.
Welcome back to another episode of Bourbon Pursuit, the official podcast of Bourbon. Kenny and Ryan, back in Bardstown.
On the road again.
But this is fun. We love going on the road. And today it's funny because, we drive around Bardstown. We do a lot of these interviews. However, this is one place that I had never driven up, and we drive past it quite frequently, especially if you're a frequenter over at Keystone Liquors.
Yeah.
Yeah, you drive by.
Or the cinemas. You go to the movies. It's right across the street.
It is. And but it's one place where I drove up and I was amazed like how beautiful the grounds are here at Lux Row Distillers. And being able to and the first thing that we saw was like a house that you said your buddy grew up in that owned the land here. And then we saw their resident peacocks.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've been up this driveway many times. It's a running joke that I say that I'm from Bardstown, but I am from Bardstown and grew up hanging out here with my buddy John and his family. So it's a beautiful property. Got a bunch of old farmhouses, cool old house, and some peacocks. And they were like, Kenny walked up and they kind of spread their feathers out. I think they were excited to see Kenny. And so, yeah.
Maybe see us. Who knows?
Yeah, but I've kind of been, just being in town, seeing the construction and everything, but never really seen it till now. And man, it's an impressive property with all the distillery and everything.
So we talk about the property, but this is also we're getting a chance to talk about a company that's kind of like an unknown titan in the industry. They've had a lot of established brands that have been out there. For the longest time, it had been a sourcing product, and now that they are seeing the light, they're like, "Hey, we got to grow, we got to expand, we got to start pumping out our stuff too." And so, when we start talking about these brands, a lot of them are going to start ringing a lot of names, like Rebel Yell, like Ezra Brooks. Like these are all the names these are all the names that you're probably very well familiar with, and probably didn't know much about the distillery and the people that are behind it. So
I'm guilty. I don't know much, but now I do know because we just did the tour and got the family history, and it's like a really cool story. So I'm excited to share that with our audience.
Absolutely. And that's a good way to kind of segue into our guest today. So today we have Philip Lux. Philip is the global brand ambassador for Lux Row Distillers. So Philip, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kenny. Ryan, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So before we kind of get into this and start talking about the whiskey and the tour and the grounds and all that sort of stuff again, let's kind of talk about your history, your upbringing, because you're a young, strapping lad.
Your last name's Lux, so obviously you have something to do around here.
Yeah, exactly. So we kind of talked about like your family's been in this business, 40 years now, something like that?
Almost 60 years.
Almost 60 years.
Wow.
So talk about your first run-in with bourbon.
My first run-in with bourbon, honestly was pretty recent over the past 2 to 3 years when we decided to build this
Are you
distillery.
just saying that so your mom and dad be like, what?
And no, I mean it truly was. As personally, my first run-in with bourbon was recent, but as a company, we've been in the bourbon industry for over 40 years, doing some private label stuff with my grandfather back when he was still around, and David Sherman, who originally started the business, with my grandfather Paul, when they were just doing that private label bourbon just for different grocery stores or convenience stores, stuff like that around the country. And then we bought our first bourbon in, I believe, '93 with Ezra Brooks from Glenmore Distillers, who's now owned by Sazerac, and has just kind of grown from there. And that was a little over 20 years ago now, and we've had award-winning brands and grown our brands over the past 20 years and into big names that allowed us to now break off from sourcing and start our own distillery and have everything distilled in-house versus sourcing our bourbon from somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's get back to the original question. What was your first run-in with bourbon?
My first run-in with bourbon was probably 3 years ago, in Colorado, when I was living there and decided I wanted to get away from kind of the vodka scene. So I started to drink some different stuff, and my mom actually came to me and said that'd be a really good opportunity for, to maybe have an idea of getting into the industry as we're getting ready to build this. So I jumped kind of head over heels into the bourbon industry and kind of ran with it from there. Went to Moonshine University in Louisville, and where I really got introduced to bourbon and whiskey, and that kind of helped me engulf myself in the industry and engulf myself in what bourbon really is, especially here in Kentucky and in Louisville, where it's America's spirit and the most popular spirit. So,
So she kind of was like the catalyst.
Yeah.
You didn't really. You were like, it's your all's thing. I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah, I never even really wanted to be in the industry. I was always not necessarily pressured. My dad always said, do whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah.
He was never pressuring me. It was always his friends or my friends asking, when were you going to get in the industry? When were you going to do this, do that? So,
because I'm sure your friends were like, hey,
yeah,
free booze.
All the time.
Booze.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would take boxes of booze to college with me, whether it be vodka.
Yeah, you'd be a good
rum.
contact to have.
Yeah, you probably
we used
coolest guy in the house.
We used to own Admiral Nelson, so that was a pretty big
Oh, yeah.
product for us, and that was a fun product in college, and everybody enjoyed that. But on the bourbon side, I really didn't know much about it until I started taking classes and really engulfing myself in it with Stave and Thief, like I said, as well, with Moonshine U. And my mom was just said, take a chance. This is something that's different. It's something that's new. It's going to be something that you can help grow and you can be a part of. I was working in a ski shop in Colorado 2 years out of school, and loving life, but it's hard to work in a ski shop for the rest of your life. Or
Right,
work
make
in
a living.
work in a ski town.
Be a
So
bum.
I need to find something a little different, I've used my dad and different people in the company and in the industry as kind of stepping blocks to help me work into it and learn more about it. And I feel that I'm learning, every day, whether it be with our products or the distillation process or the supplier versus distributor side. And with my job, it really allows me to learn, frequently and continue learning, and traveling and seeing different how bourbon and whiskey is viewed in California versus in Kentucky versus in New York. I like to call, the Bourbon Trail like the Napa Valley of the Midwest now, because and you guys probably see it firsthand as well, where everybody's flocking here now for that bourbon.
Even
So,
the peacocks.
even the peacocks.
Yep.
They're always here, and they love it here.
So kind of talk about what you do see the difference in bourbon, whether it's the community or culture, as you're doing these travels, just across the U.S. Like what's something that kind of stands out to you?
I think something that really stands out is the recognition of the bigger brands. You go to California and I went up to Seattle for Seattle Cocktail Week, and people had never heard of Lux Row, but they had heard of, they heard of Heaven Hill and Maker's Mark and Jim Beam. And, for me, my passion and what I really strive to is grow not only our brands, but our brands are part of a bigger name now of Lux Row. So I think, to answer your question, Kenny, the major difference that I see is how quickly a brand like Lux Row catches on in Kentucky, because, we're a year and 7 months out from, putting juice in our first barrel, and people recognize those brands like, they have, throughout time, and they recognize Lux Row now, as in, you go to San Francisco Whiskey Fest, those are all whiskey, enthusiasts. So they're going to, they've probably been following those brands, but they're not super familiar with it. Maybe they've seen that Lux Row logo somewhere, and now they're going to be, I'm going to be there, and they can, learn more about it on a firsthand basis. Or up in New York, I was up there and personally introduced David Nicholson Reserve into the New York and the Boston market in front of all the distributors. So just different brands that aren't necessarily recognized throughout the country, or are and don't have a lot of backing to them, that need help, growing. And with the distillery, it's allowed us to help grow those brands in a different way, where we can, one, bring customers here, and, they can see that product. We have people from all over the, country, if not the globe, coming here when they come to see Heaven Hill or Jim Beam or Maker's Mark or Limestone Branch down in Lebanon. They drive right past us now. So we're in a very unique spot here that it allows us to help grow.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no, go ahead.
All right, well,
I won't cut you off.
I'll keep going. I mean, because I was talking about, I mean, we talked about it kind of at the beginning of the show that, the Rebel Yell, David Nicholson, Blood Oath, like Ezra Brooks, like these are pretty iconic names in whiskey. Like they've been around for a long time, but people didn't really know a lot of the background. And so Lux Row is also, is it underneath the umbrella or an extension of Luxco as well? Can you kind of talk about the differences, what you have there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Luxco is, I like to call it our parent brand, but Lux Row is actually technically a supplier of Luxco. We own it as a family. My dad, is the chairman and CEO still of Lux Row, but we act as a supplier for Luxco's bourbons. But we're also, owned and operated, family owned and operated out of St. Louis with my father, myself, my brother, my mom. My brother's not in the industry. He's an aerospace engineer, but he's still part of the family.
What a nerd. Yeah,
he's won a little bit of a different path than myself, but to each its own.
Yeah.
I've found a niche here, but I mean, Luxco is a worldwide supplier of spirits. We own a multitude of about 100 different brands. Everclear probably being the biggest. My grandpa Paul purchased that. Way back in the day. That was his first big product.
You were the most popular guy in college.
Yeah, I know.
And to this day, I'm proud to admit I've actually never drinking Everclear.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yep, never drinking it.
Let's put in like hooch or something.
So it's Everclear is the biggest one, but then we've got Pearl Vodka, Aero Cordials. We own 3 different tequilas. Juarez Tequila, which is our mixto, which you can find in like a Texas Roadhouse well. Margaritas, usually Juarez Tequila. We have El Mayor Tequila, which is our ultra premium, as well as Exotico Tequila, all based out of Mexico. But it all, we're the supplier for that. So we've been partners with the Gonzalez family over there for 30, 40 years. My grandfather worked with Rodolfo Gonzalez's father, so still very family oriented. And then over on Lux Row, you obviously can't get to Lux Row if you don't have Luxco. And so over the past 20 years, we've purchased all of our bourbon brands. Ezra Brooks being the first in 93 from Glenmore Distillers. And then we had Rebel Yell in 99 that we purchased from Stitzel Weller. David Nicholson is one of my favorite brands to talk about because it originally started in St. Louis, Missouri, and we can go into that story.
You got a little bit of a soft spot for St. Louis, don't you?
I do. St. Louis, born and raised, my hometown. Got to give a shout out to our Blues Stanley Cup champions. But, all of our brands have a very unique backstory to them, very unique roots. That's why here at Lux Row, our motto is real roots, real family, real products. We have the roots not only with the products, but the real roots here in Bardstown with the Ballard Farm. They've lived there, and Ryan, you know this, but Big John Ballard lived there for 40 years, raised his kids there, his grandkids there. I mean, this was their family farm. So we have the real roots with the products as well as with the farm. We've got the real family with myself, my dad, my mom being the creative director. So she worked her butt off, getting this place up to top notch, within 2 years. then we've got the real products, and the drinkability obviously speaks for themselves when you let them touch your lips. But each one has different awards.
I was about to say, because the Ezra Brooks Barrel Proof kind of went off gangbusters this year. People were going crazy over it.
It was crazy, yeah. So, right when we reintroduced it, Fred Minnick, who's
never heard of him.
I don't know who it is, but
I heard he's a turd.
He called it his 2018 Everyday Sipping Whiskey of the Year, which absolutely blew it off the rails. All the allocations from across the country were going haywire, and so people, were in love with it. And then somehow, some way, it won in San Francisco 2019 Straight Bourbon of the Year, 2018 Straight Whiskey of the Year, which was absolutely huge for us once again. But then David Nicholson Reserve back-to-back double golds in San Francisco in 2017 and 2018, as well as Straight Bourbon of the Year in 2017. Rebel Yell 10-year-old single barrel was top 20 whiskeys of the world. It was number 12. There were only 3 American whiskeys on that. So we were really, really fortunate to have that one. It's also a very delicious product, as well as won some gold medals. So each one, that real roots, real family, real products, really comes into play with Lux Row, as well as Luxco in St. Louis. But very family oriented. But Lux Row is that's what we strive here.
So has your dad ever told you about how he had the foresight to like start buying up these brands like before the big boom? Like, has he ever talked about that? Like, why did bourbon interest him, I guess, from in the early 90s when no one cared?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll need to pick his brain about that because I should definitely know that. I know that he's always looking to acquire and sell different brands, whether it be bourbon or rum or vodkas or tequilas, stuff like that. But he sees an opportunity and he'll jump on it. David Nicholson, he literally bought that product from the Van Winkle family. He was on the phone with Julian Van Winkle, which is a pretty cool story, especially, and if you guys want, I can go into, how David Nicholson 1843 came about.
Do it. Let's hear it.
But so this is my favorite story to tell about our bourbons because it hits home for me. It goes back to 1843. I've looked it up on Google and actually found found David Nicholson's grocery store that I'm about to talk about in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
So he was a grocery store owner back in 1843 in St. Louis, Missouri. So he made that 4-year-old wheated bourbon in his basement of his grocery store. 50 years later.
I was about to say, you can do that?
Yep. 50 years later, in 1893, some guy named Pappy Van Winkle, never heard of him, might know something about wheated bourbon. I'm not sure.
What's that?
Yeah, exactly. He purchased that product, continued that mash bill, and then in 2000, my father, Don, purchased that product from Julian Van Winkle, which means we've now brought that full circle from 1843 back to St. Louis where it originally started, which is a really cool story to tell. It's 100% true, and it puts that family, atmosphere and that family feel back in that product that has been there throughout time, but might not have been recognized. And then we introduced David Nicholson Reserve that won a bunch of awards. It's a 7-year ride bourbon at 100 proof. So they interact with each other very well. They're different taste profiles. One's very creamy, one's still a little bit sweeter because of that wheated bourbon. So that's David Nicholson is a really cool story with roots dating back to 1843, but also roots dating back to the Van Winkle family.
So where was Blood Oath made? Not in a grocery store, right?
Talk
about Blood Oath and how it kind of got its name and how it made its way to your portfolio.
So Blood Oath was a product that our head distiller is very, very fond of. John Rempe. We wanted something that he could put his name to, and that it could be his, and that he could continue to create, delicious blends, year after year. So John goes to different places and different distilleries and finds very unique barrels that he can blend together. And what we wanted was 3 extra age bourbons blended together with a unique bourbon that's finished in something different. So Pact 1 was 3 extra age bourbons blended together, not finished in a unique barrel after that. Pact 2, 3 extra age bourbons, one of which was finished in a port barrel from Myers Winery in Cincinnati. Also family owned and operated with my cousin, Paul Lux, who owns Myers Winery. Pact 3 was finished in a Cabernet Sauvignon barrel for an extra 6 months. John actually went out to Napa Valley and picked those barrels from the sommelier or the head wine guy, at Swanson Vineyards out in Napa Valley. Pack 4 was finished in Rebel Yell 10-year-old toasted oak single barrels. So that was a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 9-year-old. And that 9-year-old was finished for an extra 6 months. So you got very dark chocolate notes. So these are all things that, John personally, puts that bourbon in those barrels and tastes them month over month to make sure that they're at that flavor profile that he wants. So when I tasted that Blood Oath, or that 9-year coming out of those Rebel Yell 10-year-old toasted oak barrels, it was very dark chocolate. It tasted not like chocolate milk, but kind of cocoa almost. It had a very chocolatey taste to it. And then Pack 5, everybody's looking for that extra aged, super high proof, very unique bourbons these days. So Pack 5, it's an 8-year-old, 12-year-old, and a 13-year-old, and that the 8-year-old rye is actually finished for an extra 6 months in Caribbean rum cask. So that's what we're drinking right now.
Nice.
That Caribbean rum cask, you get very sweet, sugary. Yeah,
Ryan's empty.
Sweet, sugary notes on the front end. You get like dark fruit, banana. You get that oakiness coming through from that extra age, that 13 and 12-year-old coming through there. So Blood Oath is something that what the Blood Oath attests to is that nobody knows where he finds his barrels or his bourbon, but he puts together a product that is very unique and is for the bourbon enthusiast. And if you'd like, I can read what the actual Blood Oath label says on there. But it gives the whole story. But if you think about it, you prick your finger with a buddy and you make a Blood Oath. You don't tell those things. Only you guys know where it's from. And
until you get on the podcast,
until you have to reveal all your sources. Exactly.
Reveal everything.
That's all we do. We sit here and poke and prod until we find out mash bills and ages and where you source your barrels,
and we save our blood.
Yeah. So that's cool. I mean, I think that's a side of at least that particular brand that most people don't know about. I can remember when I think Blood Oath Pact 1 came out, and there was just kind of this like, what is this? Where did it come from? It's in a box. Like, what is this stuff? And so now we kind of have a little bit more of the information and really kind of what goes into it. Now I know that each pact is uniquely different as well. It's not supposed to be this similar creation over and over and over again.
Yep. Yeah. The main similarity is
that it's only 3 barrels. Is another thing too.
It's three extra age bourbons is the main similarity. Excuse me. And each year, different box, different label, different flavor profile completely. And it's something that John can really get behind and put, a lot of his passion to it as well, other than, all the other bourbons. But he loves the Blood Oath, and it's growing in popularity. Year over year, we've continually made more of it. It's still allocated. But I believe we made, I think it's 5,003 in cases for this one, so about 15,000 bottles, maybe a little bit more. Might have been 17,000 bottles, but it's allocated.
It's a lot of bottles for 3 barrels. Yeah, how you're doing that?
Well, it's not 3 barrels total.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's just three different.
I thought it was
3 different ones.
I literally thought it was like 3 barrels.
No. So like
somebody's math is way off here.
We'll take about 40. About 40 barrels. So like with the Pact 4, we had 40 Rebel Yell 10-year-old barrels that we sent back to the cooperage. They took them apart, scraped the number 3 char off, put them back together, stuck a flaming hot rod in the middle for about an hour, put a very deep toast on them, put them back together and sent them back to us. And then we aged that 9-year-old or finished that 9-year-old for an extra 6 months in those barrels. So it wasn't all 3 bourbons finished in those barrels. It was only that one. Mm-hmm. So then John will blend them together in whatever way he finds best, so that he gets those flavor profiles that he's looking for.
Nice.
So it's more than just, it's three types of barrels, but it's not 3 barrels total.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And so was Rebel Yell acquired at the same time as David Nicholson?
About a year before, but right around the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that already has a pretty historic past, being something that was at CECIL Weller and stuff like that. It's good to kind of get the background of what these are, and I'm assuming this is the line that you have right now on your bourbons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rebel Yell, Ezra Brooks, Blood Oath, and David Nicholson. The Rebel Yell we just reintroduced, or we just new label on it, which pops much better than the old one. You can really read the lettering, so we've reintroduced that to the market. we're coming out with new bottles and new products eventually. As we get going, there'll be something along the lines of a regular or just like a distillery product from Lux Row. So definitely look forward to seeing that at some point. But yeah, this is our line. These 4 products, our 2 mash bills, our ride mash bill and our weeded mash bill. We can get to all of our products from those.
And so I guess let's talk a little bit about the distillery here, because we mentioned when we were walking and talking, breaking ground around 2016, which was, for us, I remember doing the podcast and we were like, oh, what's this place that's getting ready to start? And we didn't really think anything of it. And now a couple of years later, we're here finally doing a podcast with y'all.
And then you realize they make, they have Rebel Yell and Devil Mix and all those brands.
All the big brands that you've probably never heard of before. And so kind of talk about the timeline of breaking ground, when you first started distilling, getting everything online, the first barrel, everything like that.
Yeah. So, we broke ground January 2016. The Ballards lived in that house pretty much 2 weeks until we broke ground on the property. So it was still their family farm pretty much up until then. I mean, we obviously bought
we're about to make this happen. Get out.
We broke ground January 2016. We were on about a 2-year, we wanted it to be up and running in 2 years. So January 2018, I think January 10th, we filled our first barrel. January 5th, we turned the still on. And then April 11th, we opened up to the public. So that was our grand opening. And that was a huge day, not only for our family, but for our company. It was the largest investment that we've ever made for our company. But it was really big in not necessarily more morale, but just for the whole team. I mean, my dad shut down our whole company in St. Louis and bussed about 350 of his employees out here so that they could stand out on this front lawn while we had bagpipers, walking, taking my mom and my dad and David Bratcher, the president of our company, down to the flagpole to raise that Lux Row flag for the first day. So you got people that, have driven a forklift in a warehouse in St. Louis for 30 years with a smile on their face, coming to work every day for my dad and my grandfather, that got to come out here and see firsthand where where that Rebel Yell or that Ezra Brooks is, that they're pushing every single day and loading trucks. They got to see firsthand where that's made with their coworkers. And it really spoke volumes, who our family is and what we're all about. And just to have everybody out here is just a really cool experience. April 11th, 2018, we'll remember that day as, the day that, we cut the ribbon on this place and opened it up to the world. And that really is what we did, not only here in Bardstown, but I mean, I'm going to London next week to, work in the market with Ezra Brooks and Rebel Yell, with our international reps over there. So, to see it grow over the past, whatever it is, year and a little over a year and a half now, from where it was to where it is now, and then just envisioning where it can go, over the next 2, 5, 10 years and past that, is really special. And just to see, everybody in the company, really get behind it. Everybody in our bourbon section of Luxco get behind it, and all the events that we're doing. We're now going to be at every whiskey fest around the country. So Chicago, San Francisco, New York. I'm missing a couple.
That's okay.
But
there's a bunch.
Whiskey Fest, Whiskey in the Winter in St. Louis. We'll have a booth there. So everybody's really getting behind it, especially here in Bardstown. I mean, you go to Talbot or Mammy's, they've got our products and they love it, and they'll sell it. Or
gotta love Mammy's.
You gotta love Mammy's. Gotta love Mammy's. You can't go wrong with the country cooking there.
Yeah.
We had a group that came here. It was like a VIP tour or something, and they went to Mammy's for breakfast, and they were just like, that was crazy. The pancakes were huge, and they're like, I couldn't even.
They're like, we're bloated.
Yeah, let's take a nap.
Yeah. But, so talk about, why did you all decide to do the distillery here and not kind of do a footprint, in St. Louis?
There are more craft distilleries popping up around the country now more than ever before. So how do you find the best stories and the best flavors? Well, Rack House Whiskey Club is a Whiskey of the Month club, and they're on a mission to uncover the best flavors and stories that craft distilleries across the U.S. have to offer. Rack House's box ship out every 2 months to 39 states across the U.S. In Rack House's April box, they're featuring a distillery that mixes Seattle craft, Texas heritage, and Scottish know-how. Rack House Whiskey Club is shipping out 2 whiskeys from 2 Bar Spirits located near downtown Seattle, including their straight bourbon. Go to rackhousewhiskeyclub.com to check it out and try some for yourself. Use code PURSUIT for $25 off your first box.
Why did you all decide to do the distillery here and not kind of do a footprint, in St. Louis? You got a bunch of brewery scene there, a nice big city like, and you're bottling there still currently. Why not do it there instead of kind of putting your foots down here, or not your foot, but making your stamp here in Bardstown?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that, Bardstown is the heart of bourbon country, and we found that I think we wanted to be around everybody else. I think it definitely helps us being here versus, being in St. Louis. We have our other, our plant in St. Louis where everything else is made. But, this is bourbon country, and we wanted to be by the other distilleries, and we wanted to be right in the heart of it. Like I said earlier, the Napa Valley of the Midwest is that bourbon trail right now. And yes, people are going through St. Louis but they're going to go there and see beer. When they're coming through Kentucky, they're coming for bourbon. And we needed somewhere that could be, 100% about our bourbons that we could, really get behind. And we've been sourcing for 20 years. So we've been driving our barrels from Kentucky back to St. Louis for 20 years. So, and it's been working for us. Why change anything now? Why not, break ground in the heart of bourbon country where we have that limestone filtered water? I mean, we distill, we cook, we ferment with Bardstown city water because it's limestone filtered. We don't do anything with it when we're putting it into the cooks or anything like that. We'll reverse osmosis, purify it when we're proofing down and everything. But to be here in Bardstown in the heart of it is what it's all about, and that's where the most traffic is. That's where people want to come to see that bourbon, and also in Kentucky, and it's the same weather as Missouri. You just get it about a day later, but you get all 4 seasons. Mm-hmm. You get all 4 seasons: very hot summers, very cold winters. So that aging process is really unique here in Kentucky, and is probably the best aging process for bourbon. So, I mean, and we're right in the, Lebanon, Kentucky is not far away, so Independence State, it's easy to get barrels from them. Everything very centrally located here in Kentucky. Selfishly, I like being in Kentucky because it's close enough to St. Louis where I can drive back and forth.
Just a few hours away.
4-hour drive.
Yeah, it's not bad at all, but I think this is where the majority of people know what they're talking about here in Kentucky for bourbon. And when I got started, I in the industry, it was a little challenging for me because I was kind of just cold calling on different bars and restaurants and stuff like that. And the saturation of bourbon in Kentucky, Louisville, is just insane. I mean, you go into any bar and there's more than 100 bourbons on there. So to be able to get our name behind something that can compete directly with those big brands, with Lux Row, but also, Rebel Yell is growing, Ezra Brooks is growing, David Nicholson's growing. David Nicholson Reserve is the biggest, our top SKU coming out of the distillery here. It definitely speaks to the location that we're in.
I guess I forgot to question about this. So what's there between the regular David Nicholson and the Reserve?
The 1843 is a 4-year-old wheated at 100 proof. So 4-year-old wheated bourbon. And the Reserve's a 7-year-old rye bourbon at 100 proof.
There we go.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So one's wheated, one's rye.
All right. So now our listeners know exactly what you're looking at when you're perusing your store shelves over there. So I guess, as we kind of keep talking about the distillery here and everything like that, it's a massive still. So kind of talk about the relationship you have with Vendome and the size of it and kind of like how much product you're pumping out too.
Definitely. So, yeah, we got our still 43 feet tall, 36 inches in diameter, handmade custom copper still from Vendome in Louisville. So family owned and operated with the Sherman family. They are the best when it comes to still making. There's obviously other stills, hillbilly stills, Trident stills. I would think Vendome is up there with, the best in the industry. But yeah, so ours is a 43-foot column still, which then feeds the low wine into our doubler, which is also made by Vendome. I'm not 100% sure the capacity of the doubler, but once it gets into that doubler...
We'll let you slide on that one.
Thanks. pure alcohol in there, no more grains or anything. And we're going to pump out about a million gallons a year, which is about 70 barrels a day, with the capacity to do about we do about 20,000 barrels a year, and we have the capacity to do about 50,000 barrels a year if we add a couple fermenters down the road when we need that production to jump up.
Is that based off like what you're kind of seeing sales in the marketplace with your current brands, or is that kind of like we see this is the growth of what this company is going to be?
Yeah, a little bit
4
of
to 5
both.
years.
Obviously, there's projections, and I don't see those projections firsthand. But I think we deplete about 20,000 barrels a year, so maybe a little bit less. But as those projections and stuff, as we get rid of some other barrels that we have at other distilleries, we'll by the time those are finished, we'll be ready to dump our first 4-year-old barrel here, and we can just kind of jump right into it seamlessly. And that's what was kind of unique about us building here as well, is that we've been in the bourbon industry, owning our own bourbons for over 20 years, and we've been doing it. We've had it working very well and very good relationships, and to have those products, we're doing the same thing that those other distilleries had been doing for us, except now everything's in house, and we were able to have barrels aging, continue producing those products and having them in the market while we're building our distillery. So whereas a smaller craft distillery that's just popping up out of the ground, they're either going to source their product off the start, or they have to wait a year or 2 years for their first product to come off the still or to be dumped out of the barrel. For us, we could just jump right into it, and there's not too much of a leeway in getting that still turned on, pumping out juice, and just jumping right back into that process of putting bourbon in on the shelves.
Yeah, I guess that also kind of leads into another question, is when you start thinking about when the day does come when your barrels are ready. And so you said like 2022 is kind of like the date that you all are aiming at. Is there ever any worry? Because if you're sourcing and you're buying, and you've been buying at a consistent product, and you kind of know exactly like what it's going to be at that age, you have a little high confidence, and then now you're kind of like, okay, now we're working with our equipment. Is there any sort of thoughts or worries to say like, God, I really hope it's going to be ready in 4 years?
Personally, I don't have any worry, but people in the industry, I'm sure, will have worry. I don't have any worry for a couple of reasons. One, I've tasted our year juice that came out of our first make barrels, and it's absolutely delicious at 125 proof, very caramely, very dark for a year, which gave me a lot of confidence into what we're going to be taking out of those barrels, 3 years down the road. But also when we're doing the exact same thing that those other distilleries, had been doing for us for 20 years. Our head distiller was we were deciding what that mash bill was going to be, stuff like that. But when we pull our barrels, especially for our Rebel Yell and our Ezra Brooks, as well as some for the David Nicholson, but mostly the Rebel Yell and Ezra Brooks, we're going to pull in a cross-sectional method from the rickhouse. So we're not going to rotate any of our barrels. So when we pull those barrels, we're going to pull 200 barrels, maybe 250 barrels at a time, and blend those all together to get to that consistent flavor or proof that we've had for the past 20 years. That's been, award winning, or that we've been putting on the shelves year in and year out. So, and that's all tested by our head distiller and some people back in St. Louis too, making sure those flavors are there. But me personally, I don't really have any worry, because we have the best in the business, doing what they do here. But I'm sure that's going to be a thought of some people once we get our first product, that we actually distilled here, into the market.
You all trying to kind of replicate the existing profiles you have now with the existing brands? Is that kind of what your mash bills are geared towards, is kind of replicating the juice that's in it now?
It's going to be the same mash bill. We're using the same corn. We're using the same wheat or rye. We're using the same yeast, everything like that. We're just doing it in-house now. So,
gotcha.
It's hard to...
I would think that would be the smart way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of replicate it off a year and 7-month-old barrel.
Sure.
As we get closer and closer, I'm sure that replication process will become more in depth, and taking a couple different barrels and mixing them together and proofing them down to see if we can get to that exact proof, or that exact flavor profile, which I know we will. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's definitely some worry or thought into if it's going to be exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's always a concern when you're doing this and figuring out, okay, do we keep the sourcing? Do we start blending a little bit? That sort of thing as you start going down that path even more. And so we kind of went on the tour. So we have 12 fermenters here,
12
something
fermenters
like that. I'm already testing my knowledge here. 12 fermenters, a massive still, the doubler. What else am I missing that we kind of saw on our little tour here when we talk about
proofing tanks? We got some proofing tanks. We'll put juice in the proofing tanks at 140, and we'll proof it down to 124.9 for it to be bourbon. Can't go in 125 or higher.
And so talk about the storage capacity we have here too, because we were able to go inside there. You have this beautiful wall of barrels. Anybody that missed, you can always check out Instagram, scroll way back, and you can probably find it. But there was an idea that they had of being able to make an impact when you come into a particular warehouse. So kind of talk about what that is.
Yeah, so my dad, Don, and David Bratcher, the president of the company, had a really really great idea, honestly, to take out first couple ricks in a rick house and just make a big wall of barrels that people could see and allow people to really, see what a rick house looks like, see the magnitude of a rick house, really see how many barrels are in a rick house from floor to ceiling instead of just being in a confined claustrophobic area, and leave a lasting impression on people that come to the distillery. I don't quote me on this, but I believe it's probably the number one picture people take at our distillery. Once they get in there, the wow factor is definitely there. Yeah, number 2 is peacocks. Blend them together and make one. The wow factors, definitely there. We have in that rick house, all of them are built by Busick Construction here in Bardstown, also family owned and operated. But they were kind of skeptical about it at first until they did some engineering on it and they found a way that it would work. And so we were the first ones to do it. We're one of, that rick house is one of a kind in the industry. So Busick has brought other people, that are maybe interested in it to kind of look at that. But all of our rick houses aren't like that. So that one our first one, Rick House 1, holds 19,200 barrels. And then all of our other rick houses hold about 20,000 barrels.
So if my math is right, about an 800 barrel sacrifice.
Yep,
right?
About 800 barrel sacrifice. And we definitely think that that sacrifice, paid off in aesthetic purposes. I'm hoping that those barrels stay on that wall for a very long time, at least like 10 years, me personally, but I'm not the one calling the shots when it comes to what barrels are being pulled. But, we've got some special barrels on that wall that people can see and hear the story about. And those rick houses, that's where the magic really happens. I mean, in my mind, the barrel is the most influential aspect of the bourbon process. You get 70% of the flavor, 70% of the flavor, 100% of the color. So it'll be interesting to see how a little bit of that extra airflow kind of affects the barrels in a positive or negative way.
We hope all positives.
Yeah, I'm
positive
hoping all
vibes around
positive.
here.
Absolutely, 100%. But it's just we tried to be differentiate ourselves from other distilleries in a few different ways through visuals, whether it be the video at the start of the tour, the artwork throughout the tour, or the rick house, very, very visually appealing that people, it sticks with them when they leave here.
It's one of the first warehouses we've been around to recently that doesn't have like the black fungus everywhere yet. Right?
So we don't have that yet. We'll
get there.
We'll be
Just
getting
wait.
it. I think it's starting to grow on a couple of the small trees out there. But,
It's like every tree in Bardstown's black. Like you bring someone like, what's wrong with your trees? It's like, don't worry.
It's just the bourbon.
Don't worry.
Bourbon
It's just tree.
It's just the bourbon. It's just the bourbon talking.
Yeah.
And so, last thing I want to kind of talk about, because I think the brands are a very sort of focus for what you do and all the ambassadoring. I think that's a word that you do around the globe. Sort of what has been like the one thing that people latch onto when you talk to them about their brand or about your brands? Like, is there one thing in particular, each one of these, that they're kind of like, oh wow, like I didn't know that, or that's a pretty cool little factoid?
I think there's a couple things. I think the roots behind each one of our brands is very unique, and people don't realize the roots that each brand has come from. I mean, if you mention Stitzel Weller to anyone that drinks bourbon, they know that it was a very prestigious distillery back in the day that has amazing juice, that we've continued that process. Or you mentioned the Van Winkle family. Everybody knows who, or most people that drink bourbon know who, the Van Winkles are. So I think that the roots of each one of our bourbons is very unique. The flavor profile is very unique. But what I really enjoy about this job is telling our family story and how we've grown throughout, the past 60 years, starting as just a small, private label distribution company and bottler, all the way up to one of the top suppliers in the country, if not the world, of spirits. And to be able to grow that family name into bourbon is very special for not only myself, but for our family as a whole. I mean, my mom, and it was absolutely a job to raise me over 25 years, but she put her heart and soul into this distillery for a 2-year process. And the tasting room, the visitor experience, that was all her. So to be able to tell our family story and put it behind not only the brands but the whole distillery in general is very special. And I think people actually latch onto it at whiskey fests and stuff like that, because Kenny, like you're saying, some people do know the brands, some people don't know the brands, and if you can give them something to latch onto that reminds them of that brand, I think it helps them. One, they'll drink it, they'll maybe ask for that over a different product at the store after. They go from San Francisco Whiskey Fest drinking all day and night, and the next morning they're like, "Oh, what was that product from Lux Row Distillers? What was that thing? I can't remember." And then maybe they remember it, or maybe I was just in the liquor store that they go to, and they walk in there, and I personally had just been talking to the owner and talked to him and explained all of our brands. So they walk in there and they say, "Oh, do you have any brands from Lux Row Distillers?" Like, "Oh yeah, we have Rebel Yell, we have Ezra Brooks, we have these brands. Are any of those ringing a bell?" And then they can kind of relate to, not just those products. Whereas, Maker's Mark it's Maker's Mark.
Yeah.
That's why we didn't want to call this distillery Rebel Yell Distillery or Ezra Brooks Distillery. We didn't want it to be a legacy distillery. We wanted it to have, we wanted to be able to distill all those products under one roof, have 4, 5, 6 brands underneath one big brand of Lux Row.
So when's the Lux bourbon coming?
You could probably look for it around Bourbon Fest time.
Yeah, there you go.
Very cool.
It's gonna happen.
So you guys are in, like you said, Luxco's in got their hands in everything. Like, is there any plans to use this facility to kind of support those brands as well, or just
not
strictly whiskey focused?
Yeah, strictly whiskey focused. Not that I've heard of. I mean, definitely not for our tequilas, obviously. That has to be in
Right.
Mexico, but we've got a distillery out in Mexico that we've worked with for over 40 years. People have actually asked me that, are you going to use the still for vodka or gin, stuff like that? As of right now, it's strictly bourbon focused and whiskey focused. Not to say that there's not something down the road that need be. We might need to do some grain neutral spirits or something like that. But right now, it's strictly bourbon.
It's like, if you got the equipment,
Yeah.
why not?
Yep.
Who knows?
So talk about some of the kinks or troubles with starting a distillery. What's kind of been because it can't all just be easy peasy smooth process.
Unicorns and rainbows.
And that's something you'd have to ask Tony or Aaron about mostly. But I mean, I'm out here 2 or 3 times a week when I can be, when I'm not traveling. Just getting everything dialed in.
It seems like everything in the whiskey business takes 3 times as long.
Probably. Yep. And we were lucky enough that people from other distilleries applied for jobs here, so there wasn't a huge training process other than just getting used to our facilities, which was awesome. And everybody that works here is fantastic. obviously capital is probably one of the biggest things when coming to building the property, or building the distillery, finding the land. This was the last piece of property we looked at. So this was my dad and David Bratcher looked at about 10 to 12 different pieces of property. So this was the last one, which definitely worked out the best, I think.
It's like distillery hunters.
Yeah,
literally like house hunters.
I know.
Like, and this one, that's not going to work.
I need 3 bathrooms.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, to tell you the truth, I really don't see a lot of the stuff that's kind of the kinks in it. I will tell you that we are, firsthand exactly what you're going to see going into the barrel is what you're going to get 4 years down the road. We're not trying to hide anything. We're not, our tour is literally you're walking through our facility and you see the exact fermenters, the exact cookers, the exact still that we use. If a cooker is broken, for example, one of the first tours I ever gave, and when I was out here, there was one of the employees hanging off the cooker fixing it. I mean, if you're on a tour, you're going to see that cooker being fixed. Maybe we're down a cooker, so we have to, double up on that one cooker now. So you're going to see exactly what goes into that process.
That should be under warranty. It's only been there a couple years.
What do they call it? Sometimes in the industry, a working showroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Like so, Philip, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today and really kind of sharing that family connection. I think you really hit home for a lot of it, of really understanding exactly what your family's been doing for all these years now, and how they've built these products, how they built these brands, and then the connections that you also have with the other families around here in Bardstown and other surrounding areas to help build the distillery in itself, and really how the next iteration of this in the next 2 years we'll see, when the products start getting dumped and they're bottled, and you start seeing that realization of all the fruits of the labor finally coming together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's very cool because like when you say Luxco or Lux Row, you're like, all right, some big corporation owns some brands, and but meeting you and it's just seeing your pride, I guess, in your in your families, what they've done, to get to this point, and like see the family aspect behind it. Like all day long, you kind of preach that this is really important to us, the family aspect, with all the relationships we have with our vendors, with our suppliers, our employees. It's really kind of cool to see that that's what's really behind these products. It's not just Rebel Yell and Ezra and Nicholson and Blood Oath. It's the Lux family. It's not just some big corporation with bean counters trying to make this.
There's probably a few bean counters.
I mean, there's some bean counters, but it's cool to see that, the family's involved, so much. So very cool.
Well, absolutely, gentlemen. I mean, I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys, giving me an opportunity to come on the podcast. I love your guys' podcast, and we'll always show up for free bourbon. No. Anytime, right?
Yeah.
No, but it's just been it's been an awesome ride over the past 2-3 years for me personally, really diving into it and seeing it grow. And my dad's always told me from a young age, in the industry, it's all about relationships. I mean, obviously life's all about relationships as well, sure. But in the bourbon industry, it's all about relationships. I mean, he's known the Shapiro family for over 40 years. I mean, Max's dad, age-wise, and I'm going to use my hands, but, it was Max's dad above my grandfather, and then Max was right under my grandfather, and then my dad was under Max, and then Max's son, Andy, is now under him, and then I'm under Andy. So I'm extremely, pleased and honored to be fourth generation coming into the business, whether it be, like you're saying, with our suppliers, like the Young family out in Atlanta with with their distribution company. His kids are now Bill Young, the third Bill Young Jr.'s kids are now working in the industry, so I get to work hand in hand with another fourth generation, and it's all about family, and yeah, it's our products, I think, speak to that. The drinkability wise, if you come to the distillery, even our tour guides, we've got a Connor Ballard that actually works at the distillery. So, his second uncle was John Ballard, who lived on the property.
Like, all right, we'll sell you the property, but you got to take Connor.
Yep, exactly.
Do some of his life.
Yeah. And we've got people that are born and raised in Bardstown. One of the people that work in the distillery. Her name is Ginger. Her husband actually hauls our slop. So it's like, intermingled family aspect without even like thinking about it. So it was an honor. I mean, it's an honor just to be in it, and just want to continue to grow our brands, grow Rebel Yell, Ezra Brooks, Blood Oath, David Nicholson. Keep striving the real roots, real family, real products, because that truly is what we have here. If you come to the distillery and get a tour,
when you come to the
distillery, exactly. When you come to the distillery, either get a tour from myself or one of our tour ambassadors, Connor, Kelsey, Annabelle, Landon. They're Casey. They're all fantastic. Either born and raised in Louisville or in Bardstown, and they're just here to help share our story, share our bourbons, and enjoy some damn fine bourbon.
There you go. Killer sign off right there. Right, damn fine bourbon.
Yep.
So make sure you come visit Lux Row, take a tour. I guarantee you'll be kind of bright-eyed a little bit. It's got a little bit of a newer kind of vibe and angle to it.
Yeah, and a beautiful piece of land. It's
absolutely.
Gorgeous.
It's been like half the podcast talking about the land.
I know. Shout out to the Ballards. No.
So make sure you come visit them, but you can also make sure that you're following us, Bourbon Pursuit, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And please support the show by writing us a review, or maybe even financially on Patreon. We always like to have that be our main support of how we keep this show going, and shout out to all of our Patreon supporters that do. So Ryan, go ahead and close us out.
Yeah, like Kenny said, we love hearing from you also. If you have feedback, guest suggestions, comments, we'd love hearing from you, because this is what we do. It's for you guys. So keep them coming, and we'll see you next time.